The U.S. jobless rate has fallen to a 50-year low. That's incredible. It sounds like tremendously good news for Donald Trump. You see, as I sit here looking through all of this news, trying to figure out what's going on, I've noticed something in the past couple of weeks, that the divide and the media framing is getting absolutely worse. I just want to know what's really happening, but you can't. Is it good news for the economy? Is it bad news for the economy? It really depends on who's trying to take your money or your attention. The more views somebody gets, the more money they make. And that's just the game. That's how it's always been played. And that means media companies can't just tell you, here's what happened. They have to tell you what is happening beyond the greater context, and they need to provide analysis and all that stuff. And to an extent, I do that too. But I guess to defend myself, I'm trying to figure out which of these outlets is most likely to be true. And I gotta admit, it's gotten to a point that I can't even reconcile half the stories I've been reading in the past week. I'm gonna say this, in this story about the jobless rate falling, they say, we'll read a little bit. It's a very short story, but you'll get the news from Politico. It's an AP reporting. The U.S. unemployment rate fell in September to a new 5-decade low of 3.5%, while employers added a modest 136,000 jobs. The Labor Department says that despite the ultra-low unemployment rate, which was down from 3.7 in August, average hourly wages slipped by a penny. Hourly pay rose just 2.9% from a year earlier, lower than 3.4% at the beginning of the year. They go on to say that hiring has slowed this year as the U.S.-China trade war has intensified, global growth has slowed, and businesses have cut back on their investment spending. Still, hiring has averaged 150,000 people in the past 3 months, enough to lower the unemployment rate over time. The unemployment rate for Latinos fell to 3.9%, the lowest on records dating from 1973. This is good news. Here's the problem. When I see stories like this, I try to fact check them and compare them. So we hop over to the story from Vox. The economy is slowing down. That's bad for Trump. The latest jobs report is ... not great. So which is it? I'm so confused. Now, look, I understand that I do something similar to what Vox does. I'm not going to, play any games about it. I get it. I'll take a look at the polls and I did a video not too long ago saying, Trump's approval rating is up. Here's why I think this makes the most sense. Meanwhile, a progressive like David Pakman puts out a video that says, Trump's approval rating is looking bad. And I try to defend my opinions and my view of these issues. But I try to base, I'm trying to figure out what the impact will be. So right now, the big story outside of this is Ukraine. And apparently there's a big story about texts being revealed. So I went to Politico, who I've cited several times, and I looked at their breakdown, and they say the facts are the issue here is not up for dispute. We no longer have an opinion about the matter, just the facts. And the fact is, they say that according to these leaked texts, it proves that Donald Trump was trying to pressure Ukraine into investigating Biden or whatever. And so I just below this, they say that according to these advisors' texts, or the ambassador, talking about the 2016 Mueller probe's origins was a prerequisite for having the meeting. Okay, here's the problem. Previously, we had a story from ABC News that claimed it was true. I had to wait 24 hours because it turned out later it was fact-checked and found to be false. We now have another story saying these texts are leaked and they claim one thing, and I can't tell you what's true anymore. Is it good? Is the economy doing well? I don't know. I mean, yes, according to Politico, but according to Vox, things are starting to get worse. It's all about how they frame things. I genuinely believe that in this instance, Vox is being disingenuous. Sure, the economy is slowing down. It's bad for Trump, I guess. But what is that? What's the real impact? It's because there were a lot of jobs last month. For several months this year, we've shattered expectations. There was one month, I think, they pulled in like 300,000 jobs in the economy, and we were all expecting like 175 or something like that. And it happened a couple times. So it averages out to 157,000 per month, which my understanding is really, really good news. But depending on what you read, you're going to have a very twisted and strange view of the world based on framing. I don't know if there's any way to get around this. We hear about the people in the media claiming that people on YouTube are radicalizing and lying and conspiracy theories. I just want to know what's true, right? So what's going on with Ukraine? I mean, it sounds like Trump is trying to investigate the origins of the Mueller probe, but the left and many in media are framing it as he's trying to interfere in the 2020 election. and depending on what you read, you're going to get a completely different framing of what's actually happening. And it's gotten worse. It's worse than I've ever seen. So I'm going to say this right now. I am not going to be I'm not going to talk about Ukraine. This is the last time you'll hear me say it. On my main channel, I'm not going to talk about it. I don't know, man. It's gotten to this point where the media is so fractured and broken, and it's getting worse. I think one of the biggest drivers of the divide in our country and in other similar countries like the UK and in Canada, for instance, it's the media, and it's partisan media particularly. There have been so here's the story I'm going to do at 4, which again is playing into this. Some woman appeared at an AOC event and said something about eating babies, and it seems so obviously to be a troll. But then you get partisan bickering. The right reports on the story, and then the left attacks the right for it and claims it's a hoax, and then it says, here's the proof. And then the people on the left say, see, the right they're always sharing fake news and conspiracies. But then the left and mainstream media are always putting out stories and correcting them a day later. So it's like, I think this is it, man. I kind of feel like this, the video I did yesterday on my main channel was, it's time to call it the BS in politics. And I point out, like, everything we're seeing play out with Ukraine, it's like a mirror was placed in front of Russiagate. But the issue is because the media is against Trump for the most part, they're now parroting what Republicans were saying about Russia. And it may turn out to be a big nothing burger. I don't know. The only thing I can really say is that when it comes to what happened, we'll do an investigation, right? We did an investigation into the conspiracy nonsense for Russia. Why won't we do it for Ukraine? So, look, I do a segment every day, 10, 1, 4, and then 6, 6:15 to 6:30. And for this segment, I was looking at the story about the U.S. jobless rates, and I was going to be like, wow, this is great news for Trump. I mean, this is a 50-year low, and regardless of how we're doing going into these next few months, it seems like Trump's going to have a lot to brag about. And regardless of whether or not jobs are slowing down, I think you're going to find a lot of people who are very happy with the economy. They're working. Look, they're working. Unemployment, a jobless rate, 50-year low. That means people have jobs and they're making money. So the left tries to say, yeah, but they're working 2 jobs, and that's why the unemployment rate is low. And they said it several times, and it's just not how it works. But when I pull up the story and I want to talk about it, I started looking for other sources and context, and apparently it's bad news. Now, look, I get it. Vox is a left-wing outlet, so they're going to frame it as anti-Trump. But what do you do when you're someone who only reads Vox? You probably live in a world where the economy is bad. Trump is screwing it up. He's corrupt. He's trying to influence the election he tried to influence the election in 2016, and then he tried to influence the election in 2020. And if you're on the right, the economy is great, and Trump is being attacked and smeared by the press. So how do you break it down? Well, typically what I would do is I'd pull up all the stories and say, look, I'm going to go with the AP on this one. And in my opinion, I think this is good news for Trump. The average is great. We'll see what happens. Vox naturally thinks the orange man is bad, and they need to toe that line that they've created. So it's kind of like, one way I've explained it in the past with Rachel Maddow. One of the most dangerous and things she did was push the Russiagate nonsense to absurdity. For years, she was putting she had insane segments about, like, one of the most notorious is that Russia would shut off the electricity in Fargo and people would, freeze or something. She apparently had some guy in the air who claimed Trump was a Russian asset since the 80s. And what she did was, imagine you have this, like, group of people, right? This base. And in the middle, this is your viewership. So this is the total group of people. Here's your viewership in the middle. She started pushing this Russiagate narrative and found that her audience started growing a little bit towards the resistance, towards the people who hate Trump. But she started going crazier and crazier and started losing people that were, moderate leftists. She's now all the way to the conspiracy side. And then something bad happened for her when the Mueller probe, came out, and they said no collusion. The meme that, her eyes were watering and people were laughing, saying she was crying, and it's like she looked like she was about to cry. And I have to imagine there's a few reasons. She probably believed it. I met with a journalist from MSNBC, and we were sitting at a bar, and we were talking about Assange and Russia and all this stuff. And this individual didn't actually know a whole lot outside of American politics. They understood, Trump and his administration, his election, but didn't really know anything about WikiLeaks or the hacker community or where these things came from, like the DNC stuff. And so we were talking, and there was a little bit of arguing, but I asked, I'm like, well, this is somebody who I had seen who had actually done a fairly responsible job covering certain stories. And I said, I've read your stories, and I think you're correct here. I think you're, at least being honest to the best of your ability. Did Trump do this? Did Trump collude with Russia? And I was told in no uncertain terms, it's a fact. Absolutely. We know it. And I was like, really? And they're like, oh yeah. And the gist of the conversation was, enough has come out that we know that proves he did it, but there's a lot we can't talk about. So once we get that report, we'll be able to say, there you go, it's definitive. Except that's not what happened. What happened was Mueller came out and said it's not true. This is just not the case. And so now I question everything else that person's reported on, but more importantly, MSNBC as a whole. So here's the thing. By the time all the dust settles and MSNBC has pushed this narrative to the point of absurdity, and then the narrative collapses, what do? So you think about Vox, for instance, and people have said the same thing to me. Like someone tweeted at me that I'm contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, and I'm just defending Trump because the media attacks him or whatever. And it's like, that's kind of true. Like, yeah, the media will lie. You know what I mean? The media will push stories like this, and I'll push back on them because I think it's unfounded to claim that a record low unemployment, a 50-year low, is somehow bad news for the president. But what they're doing is they're framing it in the smallest possible way. So this is it was one of the criticisms I had for Pakman, right? David Pakman's a progressive YouTuber, and he did a video about Trump having like the worst poll ever. And I looked at it and said, the reason why I wouldn't frame it that way and disagree with his assessment is that there was a poll that came out like a week later that said Trump had his highest approval rating ever. And so I purposefully made the video saying Trump's, record approval as a direct contrast to the video that Dave had done, a week or two prior. And I even showed David's thumbnail how it's like very similar. It's like a mirror image. But the point I was making was when you look at the aggregate of the polls, you can see that this one poll saying that Trump is the worst he's ever been doesn't show, all the other polls don't show a dramatic swing. And of the past 2 years, Trump's approval rating has steadily increased. So if I see a steady increase and then a blip towards a record high, I say the trend shows an increase in approval, and now we have this one poll showing he's doing better than ever. If it shows a general uptick and then drops a little bit, even at its worst for the time, it's not the worst it's been in 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, etc. So that's what I'm trying to do. But here's what ends up happening for a lot of these media companies. For one, as I pointed out in my main channel video the other day, they can't self-reflect. That's not allowed, right? They'll never say, maybe we're wrong, maybe we're a part of the problem. I've said it numerous times, over and over and over again. In a lot of the videos I've made, I've talked about how if all you watch is me, then you're probably getting a skewed perspective because it's just my opinion. I do my best. I respect everyone for watching. I think I do a good job. Everyone does, and that's the problem. Vox probably thinks they do a good job. But here's the thing. Vox has joined the chorus of the orange man bad media. And so what happens is news breaks that the economy is at a 50-year low. Well, they can't write positive news about Trump. They've created an audience that is polarized and hates the president. If they came out and said something to that effect, they'd be attacked for it. A good example of this is Nate Silver. Kamala Harris wrote a letter saying that Trump should be, banned from Twitter, and apparently it was to Jack or something. And I believe it was Nate Silver. He said, I believe it's a really good thing that Trump can have a direct line to the president. And immediately got attacked, saying that, he's supporting all this other nonsense, and he got attacked for it. What ends up happening with a company like Vox, because I'm not going to point to 538 or Nate Silver and claim that they're overtly partisan, but they kind of are. What happens with Vox is just like what happened with Rachel Maddow, but not to the most extreme degree. They've found that when they talked smack about Trump, they got a lot of traffic. And so they played up that narrative, and they got to a point where they built up their audience, and now they know what their audience wants and what's going to get traffic. It's not going to be, honestly, like, look, the Politico and the AP tend to be fairly, I respect them. I think they do a good job. U.S. jobless rate falls to 50-year low. There's no intentional framing to praise the president or his plans or anything like that. And they do mention that the China trade war may have had a negative impact. This seems to be rather fair and balanced. Vox, on the other hand, has taken a complete negative framing because if they took a positive or neutral framing, their audience would revolt. And they've already lost the moderates they once had. Vox used to be very, middle of the road. And therein lies, the big conundrum. I think everybody in media understands the pressures of what your audience might or might not like. But, you know, for me, I always try to explain to people, it's funny, like David Pakman made a video where he said that there are a lot of things he can't talk about. He can't talk about like Tulsi Gabbard or Andrew Yang. He gets attacked when he criticizes them. He can't talk, you know, there's a bunch of things he can't talk about because he will get a backlash from his own base and from their supporters who come to his channel, and the cost is just too high. And I think everybody gets that. Now, for me, I will stress, you can actually go through my channel and find videos where I've got massive thumbs down. Look, I have no problem saying what I feel. You know what I mean? And I think because I'm fairly moderate, I can get away with my opinions that are genuinely my opinions with relatively little fear, you know? The far left doesn't come and brigade me, and when I say things the right doesn't like, they sometimes do, or the people who watch will give me a thumbs down. And so I've had a few videos, you know, it's usually like a couple videos, maybe a couple videos a month or every other month where I get massive thumbs down, and I'm like, whatever, man, I don't care. But more importantly, like, the videos I put out yesterday, it's just what I feel like putting out, and I can see my viewership doesn't compare to a lot of these other people who do more hyperbolic content. It's so frustrating, right? And so this is what this is. It's kind of like a follow-up to yesterday's video where, you know, I made that video because to me it kind of felt like, in a sense, a day off. I was looking at all this news, and I got to the point where I was like, it's all the same story over and over and over again, and what am I going to do? Say the same thing? No, here's what I'll do. I'll say exactly this. And so that's how I operate. Whenever I see a video, whenever I see a news story, I get an idea. I say, this is what I want to talk about, and here's how I see it. And if it so happens that I'm looking at all these stories and getting frustrated and thinking it's all the same thing being regurgitated, then I say, I'm just going to talk about that. I'm not going to sit here and try and shoehorn in some video once again to claim one thing is or isn't. I'm going to call it like I see it. All of these stories are a mirror image. We're now seeing, you know, Trump being accused of what the Democrats did. It's Russiagate 2.0, but it's flipped. And I'm like, it's not just that. It's the stories about impeachment and everything. And I'm like, how many polls need to come out saying the same thing? How many stories need to come out saying the same thing? And so here's what happens today. I went and saw The Joker last night. I went and saw Joker. It's not The Joker. It's just Joker. And it was amazing. So this morning I said, I'm just going to talk about that. I got so much I want to talk about. And then when it came to setting up for the 1 p.m. video, I saw this economy thing doing really, really great. And I'm like, well, that's more good news for Trump. And so when I tried pulling up, you know, other information, this is where we get. And I said to myself, you know, this video is not about the economy, man. This video is about this twisted divide where you can frame anything you want as positive or negative. Trump could do a backflip and it would land with perfect form, and they would say Trump goofs off in front of crowd, embarrassing nation. You see the point? You know what these outlets are going to say. You know why they're going to say it. It's becoming monotonous. It's becoming redundant. And I think what we're really seeing is everyone in media and politics have kind of like blown their load, to say the least, right? That's it. There's nothing left. And the analogy I like using is that, you know, they say you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, right? You're trying to get what's left, but I love this. They're scraping the bottom of the barrel so hard that wood chips are flying out. There's nothing left. They're literally just hacking away at the base of the barrel, putting a hole in it. And then the barrel won't be able to hold anything anymore. I think the political battle has gotten to the point where there's just nothing to complain about. Another Trump scandal. Oh, wow, that's the 856,000th article I've seen this year saying the same exact thing. So what do? I don't know. I really don't know, but I do know people are getting turned off from all of this. The polls show it. People are fed up. Nobody wants to hear this stuff anymore. So I got news for you. I do have a political video coming up at 4 p.m., but we'll see what happens. You know, what I wanted to do with my main channel was talk about the presidential run. I thought, you know, my main channel should focus on bigger news issues and less so on cultural issues. And I did do like a cultural video with like Louis C.K. It did really well. And I thought to myself, I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing overt politics all the time because people do like cultural issues. But then I thought, you know, this channel does cultural stuff. And so maybe I should separate that on purpose and let my main channel be the big top stories that are, you know, more contextual. But something happens then when all of the news starts becoming wood chips from the bottom of the barrel, just scraped dry and there's nothing to talk about. And I'm like, this is it. You know, these stories we're seeing in the press are the complete lack of substance in their attacks on the president and statements about anything having to do with Democrats and Republicans. It's just there's literally nothing left. So you know, we'll see what happens. But I think I think I don't know what the issue is. I don't know how to solve this problem, but it's frustrating to say the least. I'll have more to say on this in the next segment. YouTube.com/Timcast at 4 p.m. I'm going to be talking about the Eat the Babies thing, if you've seen it or not, and there's a lot to talk about. Some fake news, some potential hoax, the context behind it. So stick around. Thanks for listening to this media collapse rant, whatever, and I'll see you then at 4 p.m.